My mom told me to stay quiet during the family toast. But as I stood there, wine glass trembling in my hand, watching my uncle raise his glass to celebrate his perfect family, I knew I couldn't keep the secret anymore. Not when I had the photos. Not when I knew what he'd done to my cousin Sarah behind closed doors for years. The silence would have protected everyone except the one person who mattered most. And if you've ever been in a situation where speaking up could destroy everything but staying silent could destroy someone's soul, please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story gets so much darker than you think. Your comments always help me know I'm not alone in this. It was supposed to be a perfect family reunion. My mom had been planning it for months, coordinating schedules across 3 states to get everyone together for the first time in 5 years. She'd transformed our backyard into something magical: string lights draped between the oak trees, tables covered in crisp white linens, and enough food to feed a small army. I'd driven down from college specifically for this weekend, excited to see cousins I hadn't talked to since I was a teenager. My mom had been stress cleaning for weeks, making sure every detail was perfect. She wanted this reunion to be the kind of memory our family would talk about for years. "Amber, can you help me with the flowers?" Mom called from the kitchen that morning. She was arranging white roses and baby's breath, her hands shaking slightly from the caffeine or nerves. Probably both. "They look beautiful, Mom," I said, squeezing her shoulder. "Everything's going to be perfect." She smiled, but I could see the worry lines around her eyes. "I just want everyone to get along. It's been so long since we've all been together." That should have been my first warning. Why would she be worried about people getting along? What did she know that I didn't? The family started arriving around noon. First came Aunt Linda with her new boyfriend, a guy with 2 white teeth who kept calling everyone Buddy. Then Uncle Mark and Aunt Sharon with their twin boys, now 16 and already taller than their dad. But it was Uncle Rick's arrival. That made the whole atmosphere shift. He pulled into our driveway in his new BMW, stepping out like he owned the place. Designer clothes, expensive watch, that confident smile that had always made me uncomfortable without knowing why. Behind him came Aunt Patricia, looking perfectly put together as always. And then Sarah. I hadn't seen my cousin Sarah in 3 years, not since she'd graduated high school. She'd been the golden child then, valedictorian, headed to Stanford on a full scholarship, the family's pride and joy. But the girl who got out of that car looked like a shadow of who she used to be. She was too thin, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. Her hair, once thick and shiny, looked brittle and dull. But it was her eyes that broke my heart. They were flat, empty, like someone had turned off a light inside her. "Sarah!" I called out, jogging over to hug her. She hugged me back, but it felt mechanical, like she was going through the motions. "Hey, Amber," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You look good." "So do you," I lied, because what else could I say? "How's Stanford? Mom said you're studying psychology now?" Something flickered across her face, pain, maybe fear. "I took a break, just for a semester, to figure things out." "Uncle." Rick appeared behind us, his hand landing heavy on Sarah's shoulder. She flinched. Actually flinched, and my stomach twisted. "My little girl's just being modest," he said, his voice booming with fake pride. "She's taking time to appreciate family. Isn't that right, sweetheart?" The way Sarah's face went completely blank made my skin crawl. "Yes, Dad." Throughout the afternoon, I watched them. I couldn't help it. There was something wrong about the way Uncle Rick hovered around Sarah, the way she seemed to shrink whenever he got too close. At one point, I saw him whisper something in her ear that made her entire body go rigid. "Everything okay?" I asked when I caught her alone by the dessert table. She startled like I'd slapped her. "What?" "Oh yeah, fine. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. I could see it in the way she jumped at sudden sounds, the way she excused herself to the bathroom every 20 minutes, the way she kept checking her phone like she was expecting bad news. It was during the family photo session that I noticed Uncle Rick's hand placement. While everyone smiled and posed, his hand kept drifting to places on Sarah's body that made her uncomfortable. I saw her try to shift away, saw him pull her back against him, saw the way her smile never reached her eyes. That's when I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I noticed how he accidentally brushed against her when he passed by. How he insisted on refilling her wine glass even though she barely touched it. How he kept making comments about how grown up and beautiful she'd become. Comments that made everyone else laugh but made Sarah look like she wanted to disappear. The worst part was how normal everyone thought it was. How no one else seemed to notice the way Sarah's hands shook when he touched her. Or how she'd gone from being the family chatterbox to barely speaking above a whisper. As the sun started setting, my mom gathered everyone for the toast. "Before we eat," she announced, "Rick wanted to say a few words." Uncle Rick stood up, raising his wine glass with that practiced charm he was famous for. "I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Family is everything, and I'm so grateful to have such a beautiful, loving family." His eyes landed on Sarah, and she went pale. "Especially my daughter," he continued, his voice thick with what everyone else heard as pride, but I heard as something else entirely. "Sarah's been going through a rough patch, but she's back home where she belongs now, where I can take care of her." Sarah's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the patio stones. The sound made everyone jump, but what made my blood run cold was the look of pure terror that flashed across her face before she quickly knelt to clean up the mess. "Sorry," she whispered. "I'm so clumsy." "Don't worry about it, sweetheart, Uncle," Rick said, but his voice had an edge to it. "That's why you need someone to look after you." That's when it clicked. That's when I understood why Sarah had really left Stanford. Why she looked like a ghost of herself. Why she flinched every time. Her father came near her. My mom caught my eye and gave me a sharp look, the kind that said, "Don't cause trouble." She'd probably noticed my expression, the way I was staring at Uncle Rick with barely concealed disgust. As Uncle Rick continued his toast, talking about family bonds and how proud he was of everyone, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah, even though she was standing right there. "Don't say anything. Please. It'll only make things worse." I looked up at her, and she was staring at me with desperate, pleading eyes. She knew that I knew. Somehow, she could tell that I'd figured it out. But then Uncle Rick raised his glass higher and said something that made my decision for me. "To my beautiful daughter Sarah, who's learned that the most important thing in life is knowing your place in the family. Some lessons are hard to learn, but I'm proud of how receptive she's become to guidance." The way he said receptive made my skin crawl. The way Sarah's face crumpled, just for a second, before she forced that fake smile back into place, broke. Something inside me. My mom caught my eye again, this time with a warning look that was unmistakable. "Stay quiet. Don't ruin this. Keep the peace." Everyone raised their glasses, waiting for the final moment of the toast. The golden hour light made everything look warm and perfect, like a scene from a family movie. But I could see the darkness underneath it all, the horrible secret that everyone was either ignoring or completely oblivious to. "To family," Uncle Rick said, his voice ringing with false sincerity. "To family," everyone echoed, everyone except me. Instead, as 30 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me, I opened my mouth and said the words that would shatter everything. "To Sarah's courage." The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone's glasses frozen halfway to their lips, confused smiles starting to fade as they tried to process what I'd just said. Uncle Rick's face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, then irritation, then something that looked like panic before settling into forced joviality. Well, that's nice, Amber, he said, his voice tight. But I think you misunderstood the toast. No, I understood perfectly. I looked straight at Sarah, whose face had gone completely white. I'm toasting Sarah's courage because it takes incredible strength to survive what she's been through. And even more courage to finally be ready to tell the truth. My mom was making frantic gestures at me from across the patio, her eyes wide with horror. Amber, honey, maybe we should tell the truth about what? Aunt Patricia asked, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her throat. What is she talking about, Rick? Uncle Rick's laugh was too loud, too forced. I have no idea. Amber's always been a bit dramatic. Haven't you, kiddo? The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. Sarah was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the ground like she wanted it to swallow her whole. Sarah, I said gently, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. Carry what? Aunt, Linda's boyfriend asked, clearly confused. What's going on here? The family was starting to murmur among themselves, that uncomfortable energy that happens when everyone knows something's wrong but no one knows what. Uncle Rick was trying to regain control, motioning for everyone to sit down. I think Amber's had a little too much wine, he said with that practiced charm. College kids, you know how it is. I haven't had any wine, I said, my voice cutting through his excuses. And Sarah, you need to know that what happened to you wasn't your fault. None of it. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time all day. In them, I saw terror, but also something else. A tiny flicker of hope. Amber, stop, my mom hissed. You're ruining everything. Good, I said, louder now. Some things need to be ruined. Uncle Rick's mask was starting to slip. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching, and his hand was gripping his wine glass like he wanted to throw it. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, he said, his voice low and dangerous. But you need to stop. Now. The only game that's stopping today is the one where everyone pretends not to see what's been happening right in front of us. I pulled out my phone, and Uncle Rick's eyes went wide. He knew I had something. What's on your phone, Amber? Aunt Patricia asked, her voice shaking now too. Pictures, I said simply. Pictures that Sarah sent me last month when she finally got brave enough to reach out. Pictures of bruises. Pictures of other things. Things a father should never, ever do to his daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. You know that moment when a glass breaks, and for just a split second, everyone freezes before the chaos starts? That's what this was. Uncle Rick lunged. Toward me, his face twisted with rage. Give me that phone! But my cousin Jake, Uncle Mark's older son, stepped between us. Whoa, Uncle Rick, what's going on? She's lying, Rick snarled. She's making up sick stories for attention. Then why are you trying to grab her phone? Jake asked quietly. Aunt Patricia was staring at her husband like she'd never seen him before. Rick, what pictures? What is she talking about? Honey, you can't believe this nonsense. Show us, Sarah said. Everyone turned to stare at her. Her voice was still barely a whisper, but in the dead silence we all heard her clearly. Show them the pictures, Amber. Uncle Rick went pale. Sarah, you don't know what you're saying. You're confused, baby. Remember what we talked about? The way he said, remember what we talked about, made my skin crawl. It sounded like a threat wrapped in fake concern. I remember everything, Sarah said, her voice getting stronger. I remember every single thing you did to me. Every time you told me it was normal. Every time you said it was our special secret. Every time you threatened to hurt Mom if I told anyone. Aunt Patricia made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. What? Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying Dad has been molesting me since I was 12 years old. The words hit the family like a physical blow. I watched my relatives' faces change as the reality sank in. Some looked shocked, some looked sick, and some, like my mom, looked like they wanted to pretend they hadn't heard anything. That's not possible," Aunt Patricia whispered. "Rick would never. He loves you." "He does love me," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "That's what he always said. That's why it was okay. That's why I had to let him. Because fathers love their daughters, and this is how some fathers show love." Uncle Rick was backing away now, his carefully constructed image crumbling by the second. "She's sick," he said desperately. "She's been having these delusions since she started therapy. The doctors said—" "What doctors?" I interrupted. "The ones you chose for her? The ones you paid to tell you she was making things up?" His face told me I'd hit the nail on the head. "Sarah never went to therapy," I continued. "She came to me because she was scared to tell anyone else, because you convinced her that no one would believe her, that it would destroy the family, that it was somehow her fault." I pulled up the photos on my phone, and even though I couldn't see them from where I stood, I knew what they showed. Bruises on Sarah's wrists and thighs. Marks that told a story no 18-year-old should have to live with. "Don't," Uncle Rick said, and for the first time his voice cracked. "Please don't show them." "Why?" I asked. "Because then everyone will know what kind of man you really are?" Aunt Patricia was sobbing now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. "How long?" she asked Sarah. "How long has this been happening?" "Years," Sarah whispered. "It started right after you went back to work full-time. He said you were too busy to love me properly, so he had to do it instead." The manipulation in that statement made me want to throw up. This monster had convinced a 12-year-old girl that sexual abuse was love, that it was somehow her mother's fault for working. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me?" Aunt Patricia was reaching for her daughter, but Sarah stepped back. "I tried to, Mom. Remember when I started having nightmares? When I didn't want to be alone with Dad anymore? When I begged you not to go on those business trips?" Recognition dawned on Aunt Patricia's face. "Oh my God. Oh my God. I thought you were just being clingy. I thought you needed to learn independence." "She was trying to protect herself," I said. "And when that didn't work, she learned to disappear inside her own head. That's why she's been so quiet, so withdrawn. That's why she really left Stanford." "I couldn't concentrate," Sarah said, tears flowing freely now. "Every time a professor called on me, every time someone touched my shoulder, even accidentally, I'd panic. I couldn't sleep in the dorms because I kept thinking he might find me. I couldn't trust anyone, couldn't form relationships, couldn't—" Her voice broke completely. Uncle Rick made one last desperate play. "She's been brainwashed by some radical therapist. These false memory syndrome cases happen all the time." "Shut up," Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. "Just shut your mouth." My 16-year-old cousin was looking at Uncle Rick like he wanted to tear him apart with his bare hands. "You're sick. You're a sick predator, and you've been hurting my cousin for years." "Jake, don't get involved in adult business, Uncle," Rick snapped. "This isn't adult business," I said. "This is criminal business. Sarah, you know you're not the first, right? People like your father don't usually stop with one victim." Uncle Rick's face went white as a sheet. Sarah looked up at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I looked around at my female cousins, Jake's twin sister Emma, who was also 16. Uncle Rick's nieces and step-nieces, the family friends' daughters who'd stayed over at their house during sleepovers over the years. "I mean, I think it's time we asked if anyone else has stories they've been too scared to tell." Emma stepped forward, her young face pale but determined. He came into my room during the sleepover at their house last Christmas. He said he was checking to make sure I was warm enough, but—" "Emma, no," Uncle Mark said, his voice breaking. "Please tell me you're not saying what I think you're saying." "He touched me," Emma whispered. Over my clothes. But he touched me. And he said if I told anyone, he'd make sure Dad lost his job. Uncle Rick had connections in my Uncle Mark's industry. The threat would have been real to a scared 16-year-old. The family was fracturing in real time. I could see people choosing sides, see the ones who wanted to believe it was all some misunderstanding, and see the ones who were starting to remember things they'd dismissed or ignored. Anyone else? I asked quietly. 2 more hands went up. Cousin, Melissa, who was 22 now, and family friend Katie, whose parents had trusted Uncle Rick to drive her home from family parties when she was younger. Uncle Rick was trapped, and he knew it. His breathing was getting faster, more panicked. This is insane. You're all insane. Patricia, we're leaving. Get Sarah in the car. No, Sarah said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all day. I'm not going anywhere with you ever again. You don't have a choice, he snarled, his mask completely off now. You're my daughter, and you'll do what I tell you to do. She's 18, I said. She absolutely has a choice. Uncle Rick's eyes were wild now, darting around at all the faces, staring at him with disgust and horror. His perfect family reunion had become his public execution. You've destroyed everything, he said to me, his voice shaking with rage. You've destroyed this entire family with your lies. The only thing I've destroyed is your ability to keep hurting people. That's when he snapped. Uncle Rick, the charming businessman, the respected family man, the pillar of the community, completely lost it. He started screaming about ungrateful children and family loyalty and how we'd all regret this. But his words were drowned out by something else. Something I hadn't expected. Aunt Patricia, Sarah's own mother, the woman who'd lived with this monster for 20 years, was walking toward her husband with a look in her eyes that could have melted steel. Get out, she said, her voice quiet but deadly. Get out of this house. Get out of our lives. And if you ever come near my daughter again. But that's when Uncle Rick pulled out his phone and said something that made my blood run cold. You think this is over? You think you've won? I have videos, Patricia, videos of Sarah. And if any of you try to ruin my life, everyone will see exactly what kind of girl your precious daughter really is. The threat hit Sarah like a physical blow. She doubled over, gasping for air, and I realized that Uncle Rick's abuse had gone even further than I'd imagined. He had evidence. Blackmail material. Proof of his crimes that he'd twisted into a weapon against his own daughter. And as I watched Sarah collapse onto the patio stones, hyperventilating and crying, I knew that speaking up had only been the beginning of this nightmare. But sometimes the nightmare has to get worse before it can end. I dropped to my knees beside Sarah, pulling her into my arms while she shook uncontrollably. It's okay, I whispered. We're going to figure this out. Uncle Rick was still standing, there with his phone, thinking he held all the power. That's right, comfort her, he said with a sick smile. Because when those videos go viral, she's going to need all the support she can get. That's when Aunt Patricia did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She walked up to her husband of 20 years and slapped him so hard the "ee" sound echoed across the backyard. You filmed her? She screamed. You filmed my baby girl and you're threatening to... She couldn't even finish the sentence. Our baby girl, he corrected, touching his reddening cheek. And I filmed her so she could see how beautiful she looked when she was being loved properly. The twisted logic of his words made several people physically recoil. My mom looked like she was going to be sick. But Sarah surprised us all. She looked up from my arms, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady. Show them, she said. Uncle Rick blinked. What? I said show them. Sarah stood up, wiping her eyes. Show them the videos, Dad. Let everyone see what your love really looks like. Sarah, no. Aunt Patricia gasped. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Sarah's voice was getting stronger with every word. I've been hiding for 6 years. I've been ashamed for 6 years. I've let him convince me that I was dirty, that I was broken, that I was somehow asking for it. She turned to face Uncle Rick. Directly, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked like the fearless girl I remembered from childhood. But you know what? I was 12 when it started. I was a child, and children don't ask for what you did to me. Uncle Rick was starting to sweat. Sarah, baby, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, she said. And I know that those videos you're threatening me with, they're evidence of child sexual abuse. They're federal crimes. And the FBI takes those very seriously. I felt a surge of pride for my cousin. Somewhere in her pain, she'd found her strength. You think you can blackmail me with proof of your own crimes? Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Go ahead, post them. Send them to everyone you know. Because the moment you do, you'll be handing prosecutors everything they need to put you away for the rest of your life. Uncle Rick's confident facade was crumbling. You wouldn't. You're bluffing. Try me. The 2 words were spoken so quietly, but they carried the weight of 6 years of suppressed rage. Jake stepped up beside his cousin. She's not alone. In this, he said. We all heard what Emma said, what Melissa said, what Katie said. You think the FBI won't be interested in a pattern of abuse? Uncle Rick looked around at his family. His wife, who was staring at him with pure hatred. His daughter, who was standing tall for the first time in years. His nephews and nieces who looked like they wanted to physically hurt him. Patricia, he said desperately. Honey, you know me. You know I would never— I know nothing, Aunt Patricia said, her voice dead. 20 years of marriage, and I know nothing about the man I've been sleeping next to. She pulled out her own phone. I'm calling the police. Wait, Uncle Rick said, panic finally breaking through. Let's talk about this, privately, as a family. Families don't protect predators, my mom said quietly. I turned to look at her in shock. She'd been trying to keep me quiet all day, but now she was standing with us. I'm sorry, Amber, Mom continued, tears in her eyes. I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to keep the peace, keep the family together. But some things are more important than peace. Uncle Rick made one last desperate play. If you call the police, it'll be in the papers. Everyone will know. Sarah's name will be everywhere. Is that what you want for her? What I want, Sarah said, is for you to never hurt another child again. Aunt Patricia's finger was hovering over the call button. Rick, is it true? Any of it? For a moment, just a moment, I thought he might confess. I thought he might finally take responsibility for what he'd done. Instead, he ran. Uncle Rick, the respected businessman, the pillar of the community, bolted across our backyard like a coward. He crashed through Mom's flower bed, jumped our back fence, and disappeared into the woods behind our house. Should we go after him? Jake asked. Let him run, Aunt Patricia said, her finger finally pressing the call button. Hello, I need to report a child sexual abuse case. While Aunt Patricia talked to the police, I held Sarah as she cried, really cried, for the first time in years. These weren't the silent, terrified tears she'd been shedding all day. These were the loud, messy, cathartic tears of someone finally letting out 6 years of pain. I was so scared, she sobbed into my shoulder. I was so scared that no one would believe me. I believe you, I said. We all believe you. I thought I was protecting Mom by staying quiet. He said if I told anyone, he'd divorce her and she'd have nothing. He said he'd make sure I could never see her again. He lied about that too, Aunt Patricia said, hanging up the phone and joining us. Sweetheart, I would have believed you. I should have seen the signs. I should have protected you. It's not your fault, Mom, Sarah said. He's very good at hiding what he really is. The police arrived 20 minutes later, followed by detectives who spoke gently to Sarah about what would happen next. They explained the investigation process, the importance of the photos and videos as evidence, and how they'd work to build a case. Uncle Rick was found 2 hours later, hiding in a storage unit he'd rented across town. Apparently, that's where he'd been keeping his collection, hundreds of photos and videos, not just of Sarah, but of other young girls he'd encountered over the years through his work and social connections. The investigation that followed was extensive and painful. Sarah had to testify, had to relive her trauma in front of strangers and lawyers. But she wasn't alone. Emma testified too, and Melissa, and Katie, and 3 other girls who came forward after seeing the news coverage. Uncle Rick was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The judge called his crimes a systematic pattern of predatory behavior that destroyed the innocence of multiple children. She also commended Sarah's courage in speaking up, saying it had potentially saved other children from becoming victims. The family reunion that was supposed to bring us all together ended up tearing us apart, but in the best possible way. We got rid of the poison that had been festering in our family for years. Some relatives took Uncle Rick's side, believing his claims of innocence despite the overwhelming evidence. We don't talk to those relatives anymore, but the family that remained became stronger. Real family protects each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Sarah's doing better now. She went back to Stanford, changed her major to social work, and wants to help other survivors. She still has bad days, still struggles with trust and intimacy, but she's healing. She's alive in a way she wasn't before. Aunt Patricia divorced Uncle Rick immediately and has been Sarah's biggest supporter through everything. She started going to therapy too, dealing with her own guilt and trauma from being married to a predator without knowing it. And me? I learned that speaking up when it matters is worth any amount of family drama. I learned that protecting someone's truth is more important than protecting someone's comfort. My mom learned something too. She apologized to me later that night, crying as she explained how she'd suspected something was wrong but had convinced herself she was imagining things. "I taught you to keep the peace," she said. "But you taught me that some peace isn't worth keeping." The photos on my phone that night weren't just evidence of crimes. They were proof that survivors deserve to be believed, that families should protect their most vulnerable members, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to stay silent. If you're watching this and you're in a situation like Sarah's, please know that it's not your fault. It's never your fault. There are people who will believe you, who will support you, who will help you find your way back to yourself. And if you're in a family where someone is telling you to stay quiet about something that feels wrong, trust your instincts. Trust your conscience. Sometimes the most important words you can say are the ones that make everyone uncomfortable, because Sarah is free now. Uncle Rick can never hurt her again. And our family, the real family that protects and loves and supports each other, is stronger than it's ever been. The toast that night was supposed to celebrate Uncle Rick's perfect family. Instead, it became the moment we chose truth over comfort, justice over peace, and love over silence. And that's a toast worth raising your glass to.